isn't it? It's interesting seeing
Dominic Piper, welcome to Suit Up the Podcast.
Hello. Very pleased to be here.
I'm excited. You were highly recommended by Stephen Hardoff, friend of the show. And the moment I started digging into your books, I was like, oh, this is definitely my jam.
So it's yeah, I know Stephen liked them, but I'm always surprised actually because they're so kind of British, I suppose. I'm always surprised there's a crossover there, and that people think, oh, although I do actually, self keeping the American market in mind, I do include lots of sort of place names where people go, oh, Baker Street. Oh, he's put that in there. Oh, Buckingham Palace. So it's just a gull American readers because they think, oh well, we'll uh, we'll be uh, we'll be sort of pretending we're there. A lot of people they do say they feel like they're wandering around London when they
Hmm.
read the books, But I can I've lived there for so long myself. I'm not from London. I'm from Cardiff in South Wales,
Hmm.
but I'm actually half Welsh and half Scottish. So you can imagine the sort of love child of Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones. That would be me. Basically, that's what you're dealing with here. So yeah, I can still see the roads. Some of those journeys I made so many times, and places like Covent Garden. And I remember
Hmm.
Exeter Street particularly came to mind where Beckett has his flat because that's there used to be you have them in America as well. Joe Allen's restaurant
Hmm.
and Exeter it's moved from there now, but I think Robert De Niro bought the site and had it demolished so he could build a bijou hotel there. Apparently, the last, so they've moved around the corner. But it was and it still is. Exeter Street is this nothing street. It's like a minute's walk from Covent Garden and the Covent Garden Market, and 30 seconds from the Strand, and yet it's just like nothing. It's just full of bins and scaffolding and stuff. So I thought it was quite good that if Beckett lived anywhere dead in the centre of London, it would be somewhere like that. And initially, this is just such a pain. Initially, I did mention that he lives on the third floor above Joe Allen's restaurant.
Yes.
And then De Niro bought the site and it's demolished and built a little hotel there. So I had to go back. And so you actually, apart from the paperbacks, you couldn't do this in the olden days where something like
Hmm.
that crops up and you have to go back and remove something, and then think how many people have mentioned this, and I think I can't remember, was it Femme Fatale? His girlfriend at the beginning says, "Oh, so you live above Joe Allen's?" And I think, well, that's got to go. So luckily they only move around the corner, so it's not. I went there actually, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years ago. It's not the same.
Oh, I mean, it
Same,
never
it was
is when they
a
do something
secret
like that.
road, yeah, a little secret road. And also it was one of those places where it was in the basement. So you went down these sort of stairs to this place and there was all sort of Z-list actors and everything looking around to see if anyone recognized them. It's a big theatre area in
Oh.
London,
Hmm.
and whatever that, I don't know what the theatre's called. The Lion King has been in this theatre down the
Mm.
end of the street for years, and it's so people go there to have whatever they have before they go to the theatre, and a lot of the staff apparently are sort of wannabe actors. So it's quite a little. I thought that's a little cool road. And it's above that restaurant, and then De Niro. So.
One of the things when I read the Beckett series is when you're describing where things are, my brain just plays stock footage from Sherlock, and
Oh
that's
yes,
how
yeah,
I
yeah.
navigate around.
Yeah, it's yeah. There's a lot of it's laziness, I think, on my part, where I know some of these areas, so I'm thinking, where can they go now to? Oh, Baker Street, I know that, stuff like that. And I think it's Death is a New Black, where they go to the Wallace Collection for lunch, and I used to work years ago just around the corner from that, and to escape the ordinary people that I had to work with, I used to go to the Wallace Collection, have lunch there, this big sort of museum, because I knew nobody would go there that I worked with. So it's just, I thought, well, where can he take her? Oh, yeah. Oh, where can he be going when she gets lifted? Oh, I know, Baker Street. So they're quite the roads that are mentioned in all of these books are quite big, well-known thoroughfares. I try not to pick completely obscure ones apart from Exeter Street, obviously. But yeah, so I'm occasionally someone will pick me up on something and they'll say, "Well, hang on. he was walking down there, and then suddenly he's like 2 miles away. How did that happen? I just ignored him.
Okay, in we were before we hit the record button, we were talking about Ian Fleming's author letters, and in one of
Yeah,
them, I remember very distinctly a fan wrote him and said, "You don't really the Orient Express doesn't have like vacuum brakes or whatever it was that like was
yeah.
described in the book," and Fleming had to say like, "It's just it is what I wrote."
There was one I think it's in that book. All these letters that people write to him are in this book, The Man with the Golden Typewriter, and he said Bond smelt the leaves burning as he walked down so and so, and it had been a smokeless zone at that point for about 3 years, so he couldn't have smelt. It's all those little things. I try to be fairly meticulous. If there's something I can't know about everything, and I do a fair amount of research for these things. So if there's something that I'm absolutely not sure of, I spent like half a day reading it up. People a few reviews have said that I appear to be a sort of expert in perfumery, but that's not actually quite the case. I did notice. I mean, the women are all quite different in the books, and
Hmm.
if I'm thinking, his observation of what they're wearing from perfume clothes is quite acute because of what he does. I generally what I do is, depending on the financial status of the female in question,
Mm.
these shops will mean nothing to you over there, or a lot of your viewers. But if it's a very expensive sort of female, I would look at Harrods
Hmm.
website and go for perfumes that I'd never heard of in my life. A step down from that in purchasing power would be Selfridges, and
Hmm.
then below that would be John Lewis, which is a sort of general kind of chain of shops. So I go, I think, okay, what would she? Would she be expensive? Okay, we go to Harrods, and you sort of click on the thing saying expensive high to low. So I go right high. So I get a load of it. And if I don't, I mean, you have a general knowledge, you see perfume branches and things like that and adverts. So if I've never heard of it, I think, well, that's probably the one she would wear. It's some completely obscure, £4,000 an ounce perfume. So it does. People keep commenting that like I can, as if it's just general knowledge, but it's not. I've even though I did notice years ago, I don't know if this is abnormal. I seem when I smell a perfume, I can sort of recognize it again if someone's got it. Maybe I should have gone into the perfumery science business. And I noticed a couple of times where I was people I work with on various shows. If I recognized it, I'd say just as a sort of suave joke, I see you're wearing Rive Gauche this evening. And I was quite surprised at the reactions to this because I thought it would be just like we wear a shirt or something like that, and they'd say, "Oh yeah," but some of them were just absolutely shocked that I would recognise what they just sprayed on themselves. Another one, I think I was in a lift with one girl, so you couldn't avoid it, and I said, "Oh, is that so and so so and so?" And she sort of blushed. I thought this is really odd. I just thought it was not the reaction at all I expected. So I thought when I started writing these books, I thought, "Oh, I'll give Beckett that." He can it's when it's like in Femme Fatale when she's fiddling trying to pick the locks outside and he can smell her perfume. So I just thought it was an unusual thing for someone to be
Hmm.
able to do, but it's sort of kind of valuable at the same time. And at some point in his bizarre past, he's been shown how to do this and why it could be important. He does it with male cologne as well, so it's
Hmm.
not just perfumes. So yeah. So I'm not an expert. I just read lots of stuff.
That's the definition of a writer.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. I mean, some of the things actually come in quite handy, for Christmas presents and things like that, where you sort of think he gets this girl a necklace or whatever. And I'm sort of scouring through all these shop websites, and I think, oh, I'll get that for my girlfriend for Christmas. That's quite nice. I think it was in the first time I did that was in the Death is the New Black, where he goes to the Royal Society of Arts and buys something for his solder. And I actually thought, well, that actually make a good Christmas present. So I'm actually buying things that I didn't know anything about or know their existence until I was doing the research for these books. So it's like a sort of slow burn shopping spree online. So
The
yeah,
the the they always say like with Hemingway, what's the deep underlying themes? The deep underlying themes of your work is the shopping list, essentially.
Yeah, basically, yeah, they're browsing department store websites. Yeah, I mean, I have been to some of these shops, so I know what they look like and things like that, but not to that depth. This is really sort of where I probably know more about the perfumes they sell in Selfridges than the girls who work behind the counters now. Maybe I should get a job there as a supervisor or something like that. But
That'll
yeah,
be the
so
next undercover thing that Daniel Beckett does.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't often do. I rarely ask people about stuff. I just read it. I don't like to approach people and say.
Hmm.
The only time I did approach people was the last one where I wasn't sure how much you could get away with hiring a vehicle.
Hmm.
Uh, I rang up this guy at some hire place and asked him. I said, would you just take it on face value that my driving license and was and the same I filled in details on your insurance form that they were true, and he just was, what, why? I said, if I was going to use this for some illegal thing, I thought he's thinking, okay, I'm just going to put the phone down now. But that's the only time I ever asked a real person for advice, something to do with their job, and it seemed to be, I thought, as soon as he puts the phone down, he's going to be able to the police and they're going to track the number down. There'll be a knock at the door, but nothing happened. So that was all right. That gives away a bit of the story in a sense there, doesn't it?
Hmm. So let's get a little into this. First and foremost, tell us about the Daniel Beckett series. When did it start?
It was not something I'd normally have written. I think I've said it before to people. These are not the kind of books I generally read. When I had to sort of rack my brains, I read things like The Big Sleep,
Hmm.
but I'm more likely to have seen the film of that, and that was when I was at school. I think someone lent it to me. So they're not the kind of books I normally read, the detective thrillers or the cold case or that kind of thing. Looking at your bookshelf, there's a lot of I can see a lot of Bond books there, and I've read the Bond books. I think I read
Hmm.
Doctor No when I was in Cubs or something like that. It was one of those things that was being passed around, particularly when he has to go down that sort of tunnel with all the tarantulas and the scalding water. That was everyone was going, God, look at that. And so I've always been aware of them, and I sort of went back to them a bit when the films started becoming popular. And I suppose John le Carre
Hmm.
stuff, in a sense, I don't steal off writers because I don't read that many that are in the sort of genre I'm writing in. But if there's anything I do steal from Ian Fleming, it's the brand names. He used a lot of brand
Hmm.
names. Obviously, it wasn't in the time where people would have paid him to do that. But the reason he did that is to sort of because the stories are so fantastic that it brings it down to a kind of reality where you think, oh, she's wearing this perfume or he's drinking that vodka or whatever it is. And I suppose from John le Carre, if anything, the names of his characters are quite memorable.
Hmm.
They sort of stick in your mind. And I don't spend an awful lot of time on that, but I was trying to make them, particularly when it's usually subsidiary characters, have interesting names, particularly if there are a lot of them different nationalities. So I spend a lot of
Hmm.
time on those. But generally, I just do it very quickly. I think if you spend a lot of time looking for a name that suits a personality or something like that, it just looks contrived. So what
Yeah.
I generally will do is it's like what was it, Bitter Almonds and Jasmine, just as an example, Leva Sondergaard, the adult entertainer.
Hmm.
I think, right, she's female, she's Danish. So I'll just go into a load of this is 21st century writing, isn't it? I'll go into some sort of site and look at Danish surnames. So I'll just
Hmm.
scroll down, write down about 3 or 4 that jump out that I perhaps haven't heard of. Then Danish female names, do the same with that, and have about 4 or 5 of each, and then think, okay, we'll pick that one for her surname and that one. And it's that quick. It takes me about sort of 10 seconds to do it. And I think if you sort of think, oh, well, this girl is a private detective or she's an adult entertainer, there's a corniness that you have to watch out for. You could
You didn't
easily
go with
slip.
any Holly Goodheads.
Sorry?
You didn't go with any Holly Goodheads like Moonraker?
No, no. And also, there you're drifting into sort of Ian Fleming area there, aren't you? Tiffany Case, Pussy Galore, and stuff like that. So I didn't realize that. I think when I read it, Tiffany Case, was she in Live and Let
Diamonds
Die?
Are Forever.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it didn't occur to me that was a joke. Like Tiffany and the jeweler, because I didn't know who they were. We didn't have jewelers in Wales. We didn't know what jewels were there. And it's just Tiffany case, like a case you would get. Things like that were completely lost on me, as were a lot of other things in the books as well.
I
But
mean, when you're reading the books at like age, I'd say 10, potentially,
mm,
like a lot of the jokes go over your head. And then as you get older, like, oh,
yeah, that's what he's
because
talking about.
especially for his time, he was definitely pushing the envelope on a
Yeah, I
couple
think
of
so. I mean,
things.
there's a lot of stuff, I mean, particularly the ones that were written in the 50s. He's
Hmm.
talking about ninjas and Bircher Muesli and stuff like this in Thunderball when he goes to the health farm. And these are things that became, I suppose, well known in culture probably in the 80s or something like that.
Hmm.
Like, I think most people hadn't heard of ninjas until sort of 70s or 80s. What's that guy that wrote that book, Eric Van Lustvader? That was an 80s
Hmm.
book, The Ninja, I think, which I read. He said not commenting on his opinion of it. And he was definitely scouring books, and you can feel it sometimes where he's thinking, how can I make this sound fantastic? And the descriptions of cars and stuff like this. Um, I don't do cars particularly, but
Hmm.
it's something you'd have to really look at to make it sound exciting. I mean, I think the only car that's mentioned that Beckett has is a Ferrari. No, Maserati, that's right.
Yes.
And he only uses it briefly at the end of one of the books to dispose of a corpse. But I did consider, not too far from where I live, actually, there's a Maserati showroom. And I thought, have I got the balls to go in there and say, hi, I'm not going to buy this X £1,000 car, but I wonder if I could just drive it around for a half a day just to get the feel of it in case I have to describe it in a book you've never heard of. you know, but I haven't done that yet. But it's the sort of thing a real author would do, I think, isn't it? I went out and then drove around in this thing. But the other one, I think it's in Death is the New Black, where he co-opts that woman's car. That
Hmm.
car I've actually driven, so I know what it's like to sort of go into the wrong gear with it and have the clutch needing to be replaced afterwards. And also, I know it's screeching up Harley Street,
Hmm.
which is a sort of fashionable medicine place with doctors who've been booted out of the National Health Service have to go and work for thousands of pounds for a quarter of an hour consultation. And I knew that road quite well, so I just thought that would be an extremely scary one-way road to go up because there's sort of sick patients coming across the road and private ambulances and stuff like that. I was trying to think what the worst road would be to do something as insane as that in. So that's why I picked Harley Street. I was asked to have a meeting with a publisher. A friend of mine had written, who I'd done TV work with, had written a couple of novels for this place, and they were looking for people who could write basically in any kind of style. And I'd done loads of different stuff, different sorts of
Hmm.
dialogue. And I just had a meeting with them, and they said, we're looking for blah, 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 some sort of action kind of thing. So I just went home and wrote out just on an A4 sheet, the idea of this, that you've got some guy who seems to have this past, but apart from the mystery of the story, there is the mystery of who he is and where he
Hmm.
came from. There's a lot of stuff in films that you see where someone is ex-Navy SEALs or they're
Yeah.
ex-cops or it's like sledgehammer to crush a gnat in the situation they're in because now they're in civilian, but they can still use a sort of Uzi or whatever it is. And I wanted to sort of remove the fact that you knew where he was from. So you've
Hmm.
got the mystery of the story and you've got the mystery of him. You don't really know what his abilities are or whether he was working on the side of the angels in any way because not to put too fine a point on it, Beckett murders people in these books. He
Hmm.
tortures them. He
Hmm.
steals from them. So it's conceivable he might not be somebody who worked in the armed forces, or is somebody who's just trying to do. There's an edge to him where you kind of feel trepidation when he comes up against these bad guys because they don't quite know, and neither do you, the reader, what they're dealing with. So you can never quite tell how he's going to react in certain circumstances. I think it's at the end of the first one, just before
Hmm.
I'm dead, when right at the end, you're just thinking, did he, is it a spoiler? I don't know. Did he just do that? Did he
Yeah.
just go back and kill those guys just because they sort of pissed him off slightly? It's just what sort of person? And the other, there's in Bitter Almonds and Jasmine, he's waterboarding somebody. There's a sort
Hmm.
of question there about it's regarded as being one of the sort of worst types of torture there is. But when you're reading it, were you glad he was doing it
Hmm.
to that guy? Did you feel sympathy for that guy when he was doing it, considering what you knew that guy
Hmm.
was up to and what he'd been doing? So there's a sort of like a moral ambivalence there where you're thinking, well, maybe it's okay,
Well, that's
all
what
your,
makes it noir in the true
yeah,
sense is that you start feeling like it's gray. It's not
yeah,
necessarily the black and white starts to disappear and all people are cruddy. It is genuinely Kiss Me When I'm Dead. When I first picked it up, I was like, okay, started reading through. I was one of the things I was just taken aback by is how well you wrote bad people to the point
yeah.
where it did kind of stick in your throat how disgusting some of this was, but then also that drove then the story so well.
That's right. Yeah, I mean they have the bad guys, I guess, have to be bad because they're
Hmm.
the what happens to them. And I think to a degree it's like I saw a review of it where someone said they're actually sort of feminist novels because which is not
Yeah.
my intention, but basically there are these scumbag guys who are treating women in whatever way it happens to be extremely badly, and they are dragged into these stories. They're beaten, tortured,
Hmm.
you name it. In the new one as well, right up, which
Hmm.
you've read, which I won't spoil for people that haven't read it. Right at the end, yes, that's it. I recognise that. Where he has an option of doing something and just
Hmm.
doesn't do it because they just annoyed him, and it's like
Hmm.
continually. There were a few for acid yellow. There'd been a few cases in London over the last few years of terrible violence and murder against women, and I thought, and I was sort of 22, 23, women that I knew thought gradually that all this was going away. That kind of attitude where women are called this and they're called that, and
Hmm.
they're assaulted and hassled. But it just seemed to me that it got worse. I can't speak for where you live, but
Hmm.
in London there were some very high profile cases, and I just thought, you can't really do anything about it other than as an example to not, it's almost like what should happen here. If you're being, there were two women who have been sort of who were beaten quite badly by a bunch of teenagers on a tube train in London.
Hmm.
I'm thinking what should have happened there is someone like him was there and did what he felt was the right thing to do. And again, you've got that grey area. It's okay to do that. Is he some sort of vigilante in effect, but
Hmm.
to an extreme level where it's not just like Batman sort of beating them up or something. It's actually killing them,
Hmm.
or worse, crippling them or whatever it is. So it was mainly that, and I didn't realize it was going that way until I did the first one. It was going to be a one-off originally, from what I
Mm.
remember, and I did see it at the time as Sakura Bianchi, who is in Kiss Me When I'm Dead. I viewed her as a kind of permanent character. I thought it'd be quite good to have someone who is almost, who beats the crap out of him as the first meeting. I thought that would be quite a good, not sidekick, but
Yeah.
an associate to him. And it didn't work out that way. The other one is the sort of the drug dealer guy who he encounters in that. I thought that would be another good sort of sidekick. I don't know. There's no other word, is there, other than sidekick? But I thought that would be a good running character. But the way they went, you couldn't really. It just didn't seem
Hmm.
that would be the way to go with it. And occasionally you get characters who come back. That's the psychiatrist,
The
and
psychiatrist.
back returns for two libidinous chapters in the new one. And
Okay, and I just have to quickly say that is an amazing use of exposition in those scenes because you do a good job of intercutting the exposition that needs to be given to the audience, but also it's entertaining, which you can give exposition well as long as it's entertaining. It's when it starts to feel like you're shoving it at the audience that
Yeah, I'm
it gets
aware of that. I've
tried.
read books, and I just think,
Yeah.
oh, massive load of stuff like this. But what I try, I don't know if this is a technique or whatever in crime fiction. I try to have sort of two things running concurrently. So
Hmm.
he's talking about something, but he's thinking about something else. So suddenly you're in the reality, the now of whatever's going on, but at the same time, something else is going on. I think the first time I did that was in Kiss Me When I'm Dead, where he ends up going for a drink at a bar and gets involved with that girl whose birthday it is. So there's
Hmm.
all this seduction of him by her. Meanwhile, he's going through the case, step by step as that is happening. So I thought if you're bored with the case stuff, you've got that to go back to. If it's absolutely killing you, to continue reading about what's going on with these missing people he's after. But yeah, so I think when I was asked to do the second one by the same company, so it just didn't feel right to have recurrent characters. I think there's
Hmm.
only Doug Teng, who's the computer
Hmm.
guy
Yeah.
that he employs from time to time, who he seems to know from a previous life in some way. I don't think he'd have just rung him up out of the blue and said, I kill and torture people and sleep with loads of women. Would you like to do this illegal work for me? So he's kind of necessary in a way. He does stuff that you don't really have the time to have Beckett doing.
Hmm.
He could do all that himself, you think, but he just hasn't got the time for it. So that's why he's used. And the policewoman from Kiss Me When I'm Dead recurs
Hmm.
occasionally, but not to such a great degree. I think that's it, apart from the psychiatrist and the new one. But I've got myself into a real dead end with that point where he's going through that girl's possessions and
Hmm.
finds the secret drawer. And there's all this stuff in there. And in this is his business card. And I just thought, how the hell am I going to get out of that? So how could that possibly be in there? No one's been in that house for 2 years. He just gets hired to find who killed this girl 2 years previously, and
Hmm.
yet amongst all her private things is his business card. So that's how I thought, oh great, we'll get Aziza back in. So that was quite handy in a sense. But
How much do you plot these stories when you're writing them?
um,
Or is
I,
it
I
more of a
use
pantser?
these. I haven't got any in here to show you. I use these big A3 cartridge pads and just do loads of boxes. Occasionally, I have scenes that I think, well, that would be good if that happened. So I just write that down and come back to it. The annoying thing is most of these things you don't end up ever using. I've got tons of it. I think, well, I forgot about that. And so I know roughly what's going to happen. I think Bitter Almonds and Jasmine was fairly linear as a sort of plot. This
Hmm.
happens and he goes to get the perpetrators, the end. And there's all that other
Hmm.
stuff going on. But the things like the way it turned out in Kiss Me When I'm Dead, I didn't see that coming at all myself.
Mm.
It wasn't something I planned at the beginning. I think saw another comment where someone was saying about the women, how you sort of like it's planned that he sleeps with whoever it is in the books, but actually of all the things, those are not planned at all. Those are not in the notes. They
Hmm.
kind of happen organically, and I hope that kind of comes across. It's
Hmm.
I think it happens in Bitter Almonds and Jasmine with Leva Sondergaard, and that sort of almost like romantic thing just came out of nowhere, as did she as a personality. All I'd
Hmm.
written down for her, I was a bit generally in a lot of fiction I've read, you see women who are sort of in sex workers or adult entertainment. People tend to think that they must be like have a certain sort of personality,
Hmm.
and they would be like this and they would be like that. And I remember finding the notes I'd made on Leva Sondergaard where she was cultured, she was into Art Deco and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and she was reading all these fairly obscure books on stuff. So I thought if you're going to have people like that in there, you can't just go them going, all right darling, something like that. You have a sort of duty to make them interesting and get away from the cliche that if they're doing that, then they must be like this. And it's the
Hmm.
same for Paige McBride in Femme Fatale, where
Hmm.
she had a sort of drug habit which she was controlling, and there was no judgment of her at all by Beckett. I think another reviewer said he never judges them. Whatever they do, whatever their lifestyles are, they're never judged by him. They're judged by other people.
Hmm.
But so, yeah, I think just to get back to Death is New Black, it was at that point I began to think, well, it would be better really if they were a whole set of different characters in each one, not set up for him to sleep with particularly, but it just seems to happen. And I suppose it because of the scumbag guys, it's kind of saying, if you're like this, these kind of women are closed to you, but if
Hmm.
you're like him, they're not. In a sense, it's a big generalization, but it's like the hero gets the girl, where the bad
Hmm.
guy end up suffocating in bird dung. But yeah, so that was it. So I left the I left the publisher. Uh, I've done this before with literary agents I've had for TV work. There's a point where you start to think I could do better than this, and
Yes.
once once that comes, you can't go
Hmm.
back to them. And I think the same thing happened with this. So I'd done the third one, or I think I almost finished it, Femme Fatale, and I thought, well, I really don't want to have to go through what some of that. They made a few sort of errors and stuff like that with it, and I just thought, I'll try and do it myself. So I got the rights back in a very sort of nail biting 2 weeks where they were going, well, like that. And then I contacted this guy to do the cover for Femme Fatale.
Hmm.
And he suggested that it would look a bit weird against the earlier covers for Kiss Me While I'm Dead and Death is New Black, with just a gun with a load of bullets.
Yeah, I saw the original covers and went, wow, like these
Yeah.
ones are so much more possessing.
Well, they're where they came. So I mean, that's why I just got the whole lot back, and the whole covers were the change. The whole look of it was changed. There's I've actually got a book here which I'll hold in front of the screen, even though the fact that I'm now in black and white means you're not going to see it. There was a photographer, a Belgian photographer called Marc Lagrange, who I thought
Hmm.
was pretty good. And I thought it'd be great to have the kind of photos he took. He used Polaroids, and he used a thing called chocolate Polaroid, which that isn't made anymore. It gives a kind of sepia, but not quite. And
Hmm.
obviously, you have to use your imaginations now at home for sepia. If you think of the girls on the books,
Oh, uh-huh.
um, it's called
Yes.
chocolate because it's used that sepia chocolate Polaroid, which you can't appreciate because my computer's got a wheel going around saying I can't do it. I've only had this for 2 years as well. But so I thought it'd be quite good to have those kind of stark, unsmiling
Hmm.
females that he photographed, and it didn't particularly say it doesn't sort of jump out and say this is a thriller, but for some reason they seem to work with the titles. And
Hmm. Your titles are genuinely amazing. Like Kiss Me When I'm Dead.
yeah,
Like again, you said that you don't read a lot of mysteries, but like your titles really have a noir Fleming
yeah. Well,
vibe.
to be honest, I think I had been influenced by a sort of noir. There was Kiss Me Deadly, which is I can't, was it Mike Hammer was one of the.
Yes.
I've never read the books by him, but I saw the
Hmm.
film
Hmm.
where the scene where the guy come with the actor now, he was sadistically smashing up this old guy's collection of priceless 78 records, trying to get information and laughing as he was doing it. But yes, so in a way, that's that one. Death is the New Black as well. I mean, it's like that. A lot of people I noticed didn't know where that phrase comes from because I saw a few comments saying I was ripping off Orange is the New Black, the TV series,
Oh. Hmm.
which I've never seen actually. I know what it is. I know what it's about, but it
Hmm.
became because black was the in color in the 70s, I think, in
Yeah.
fashion,
Hmm. Oh no,
and
it does a great job telling you it's a fashion oriented.
yeah, you feel like explaining it to them. No, no, no. Um, And I just, they're always saying then red is the new black, whatever is the new black. In other words, it's the most fashionable thing there. So I thought, as the fashion designer was his client, I thought, oh, death is the new black. Sounds like a good one. Femme Fatale, I didn't realize actually was a title of a chapter in Death is the New Black. I only went back and had a look. I thought, oh, because it took me ages to get Femme Fatale sorted out. And amongst all my research, this is big inverted commas here, research, I bought a book by Dieter von Teese, the burlesque artiste.
Mm-hmm.
And I was flicking through that, hoping something would jump out. And there was a big chapter heading Femme Fatale, and I thought, oh, that's quite good then. So I put it on my list of 319 possible titles. But the other one, Bitter Almonds and Jasmine, it's very tempting to do sort of some aggressive kind of noiry thing, but those are notes. This is back to perfume again. Those are notes that are in a perfume that's mentioned in there.
Mm-hmm.
I looking that perfume up, and I thought, well, that's the sort of perfume she would wear. But without spoiling the story, that particular perfume is worn by Liebe Sondergaard in it, but it's also worn by one of the captive people in that house. And I thought, you've got someone who should be wearing that and it suits them, but someone who most definitely should not be wearing that, in a sense. So I just thought it sounds good, Bitter Almonds, and you think, well, what's this about? And it's kind of, I think, sort of like bitter is in there, it's just got a hard sound to it, and it's a bit sort of mysterious. I noticed acid yellow, actually. You've got this, like the 4 taste things, isn't it? Like bitter in one and
Mm-hmm.
acid and sweet or sour in the next one. But yeah, I mean, they're very, I found them, I don't know, they're usually the last thing to do. And Kiss Me When I'm Dead, I think I came up with that quite early on. So it was not like to do with the ending of the book particularly, though I realized when I got to the end of the book, I thought, oh, that was
Yeah, it actually really worked well.
It was as if I had some really clever writer, and I thought, I know, I'll do this and I'll call it that. But it wasn't like that at all. So yeah, I mean, it is a hard thing, and I had Asagel in my head as a thing. I think I kind of read it somewhere. There's I think it's in Caroline Chow comes to visit Beckett in hospital and is wearing a sort of acid green jacket or something. And I'd seen that referred to, and I didn't know colours were called that. And I think it's maybe in fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept that phrase in my head, and I thought, I'll use that on something. And then when doing the new one, I happened to mention that she liked this particular colour, and I thought, oh, we could make it that colour, and then call the book that. And it made sense then that she says later on, who says? People who haven't read the book. Thinking right now, what is he talking about? The pretentious git with his Dolce Vita poster in the back. And that she says, she liked that colour so much, she said if there was ever a book written about her, they should call it that. And you're kind of holding that book, So I thought that was again, that was not intentional. that was sort of retrospectively clever, I think,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the titles are a bit of a pain. Some of them more than others, I think. Yeah.
Well, you've knocked
So,
it out of the park so far.
sorry?
I said you've knocked it out of the park so far.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you think that. I mean, they are quite striking looking. And I think the combination of them with the covers as well, where you're thinking the covers don't actually literally represent people in the books, but they almost do. You could think that the cover of Bitter Almonds and Jasmine was his former colleague.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I kind of I forgot what happened. Oh yeah. So really, I just started after Femme Fatale. I started putting them out myself, and it's just that thing of having control where you don't have to keep
Mm-hmm.
nagging people about stuff, and you just think if anything goes wrong with this, it's my fault. And I can't really sort of go with that damn publisher and that idiotic stuff. When they watch this, they think, what bastard. We've been really nice to him. And look at he's slagging us off on some. But I did actually see there's a website called Glass Ceiling where people anonymously write reports on people who are terrible to work for. And I noticed that publisher was people saying all these awful things, and said the way they talk about the authors, I thought, all right. It's yeah, so Sodom, that's it. Okay, what else?
When you were writing Acid Yellow, like there's a lot of stuff where you have Beckett in people's homes, which this happens throughout the series, but I noticed it far more in this book. You
Mm,
describe the items in the home and specifically the titles of books on the
yeah.
shelves. I was curious, how much research do you do to figure out which titles should be in someone's home? Are they stuff that
Uh,
you know really well, or just you're trying to figure out what
yeah,
would be in
no,
a person like this
yeah.
house?
So I thought what I was trying to do in it, first of all, was to make her be alive in the book, so she
Hmm.
wasn't just this person who'd been killed,
Hmm.
and you had to sort of know the most sort of intimate details. It was a bit like the sort of horror of the what's it called, the White Hotel by D.M. Thomas, where this woman is having this sort of quite intimate and extreme psychiatric help. And she ends up, it's just like this is in Germany, and she just ends up being thrown in a ditch in a concentration camp, just suddenly gone. And you thought, my God, you see people described have had deaths of that type, and you think they're just a statistic. But this was a whole book that described her in the most penetrating detail. So I wanted not to, it's not that extreme, but to kind of make her come alive. So I thought to do that, you'd he would be traveling, like it's almost like a documentary of her house and her life and the things she liked, and it wouldn't just be just because she was a piano player, there was just a piano there and a few books on music. I thought it had to be more than that, and they had to illustrate her personality. So I actually do a lot of research on what the books are that she had. Occasionally, if it doesn't matter, I'll just look at the bookshelf over there, which you can't see, and just pick thing. All right, type that one in. That'll do, just to bulk it up a bit. But in some cases like this, it had to be specific, and the books all had to be specific. I hadn't heard of a lot of them, and again, it's that thing where I thought, well, I'll make a note of that. That looks quite interesting. I might read that. Get it for some of the least cast off ideas people are getting for Christmas presents and birthday presents, because I've come across them randomly in some. But yeah, I tend to make sure that the books match the person and the stuff on the walls as well.
Hmm.
Prints that she has in her room where the piano were specifically chosen. And also the piano, actually, this I was looking for sort of really expensive pianos online, and I came across the Fazioli, whatever it's got. It's got some number or something like that on it. And I looked at the photos of this piano. I thought, Christ, this just looks incredible. It's a really high tech, top of the range thing, and I'd never heard of it. It turns out that that piano had made an appearance in Prometheus. That film with Charlize,
Oh,
and
uh-huh.
she's got this high tech flat. Is it, what would you call it, in the spaceship? And that piano is actually in that. I haven't watched it since to see it, but I thought, oh right, someone's been here first. I found that. I thought I was the first person to notice that particular piano, but for her it had to be something at the very top end of expense, basically. And I think I imagine other books I've read, they would just say, "Oh, it's a Bechstein or something like that." And I'll do. But I wanted one that even if you're a piano player, you might not have heard of it. So you have to sort of. I quite like books myself where you read something and you have to go and look it up, or
Hmm.
particularly if sort of someone says, he was reading such and such book. And that happens in the Bond book, actually. Bond doesn't read
Hmm.
a great deal when he's killing people. But there are a few things when he's on aircraft and he's reading something or other. And I've actually thought, well, oh, what is that? I'll go and find that. I tend to go randomly and zigzagging from one thing. It's why I don't read in any particular genre. I just go from somebody mentions something in a book, I just go like brainlessly onto the next, well, Amazon recommends, oh, do you? Okay, I'll buy that then. So you've got that stuff. I've got stuff going back years I've never read, but the charity shops do very well out of me. But yeah, so I mean, all those things. That's why it took. Like this one took longer. I didn't realize this one was going to be so long. I said, yeah, I just thought, and Bitter Almonds and Jasmine. I thought that's a very linear story, but it seemed to just increase. actually, generally speaking, with the exception of Death is the New Black, which is slightly shorter than Kiss Me When I'm Dead, each one has got longer each time. So the next one will be like Lord of the Rings trilogy or something like that. But
That's to your credit because I don't really, most of the books that I have are tend to be more in like the 200 page range, and that's like
yeah,
my sweet spot. Your books are longer than that, and I enjoy it,
yeah, I
which,
think it's because there's so much stuff, in,
yeah.
and there's so many references to things, and I think
Hmm.
that's where it gets out of control with the length,
Hmm.
because he's describing something, and I think most people would say her perfume was charming, whereas with him, you get 3 paragraphs about it, and I saw a negative review saying this guy could take 50 pages to describe a golf ball, but I haven't quite got to that.
But if you
Yeah,
write it well, it's enjoyable to read.
yeah, and also there's the chopping and changing as well.
Hmm.
I think when he's getting the cab to that house where uh, the van that was used for the
Yeah.
money pickup is, and you're getting him at the same time going through the history of that house and how it was Huguenot weavers lived there, and people were so poor they used to put dead bodies in the corner to rot somewhere because they couldn't afford funerals. While that's all going on, he's going through the case in his head. I think there was, I can't remember which other book it was now. There was something where he had to sort of go into a bookshop and he was pretending to browse through, I think it was a book on Sweden or something. So you were getting all this narrative every other sort of paragraph about, statistics about cities in Sweden. And it's like you can almost feel that idea of being in a shop pretending to look at something. There's all this useless to you information coming in. But yeah, I'm aware. I've done a fair amount of script editing on stuff, and I can feel when I read these things through, there's bits that I lose interest in, and that's
Hmm.
nearly always because it's just not sort of zappy enough. Basically, it's quite hard to keep that up for an entire novel. But yeah, I'm probably because I've done script editing of other people's work, and I'm sort of cruel, ruthless task when it comes to that. Um, I can sort of feel that I don't want to read that section. I want to get on to the next good bit, And I
Hmm.
think if that happens, you've got to go back and just hack at it, no matter how painful it is to. The only problem, as I'm sure you know yourself, is you find that you've chopped out something which is mentioned later on. And it's I've known other people who've done script editing where they've done sort of comedy, and they set up a joke
Oh.
at the end of a sketch, and some script editor along the line has removed the setup. So they say something at the end of the sketch which completely makes no sense at all. Just shows you the care with which comedy scripts are treated here. But yeah, I mean, it's I've always got an eye on it, and this one in particular, Acid Yellow, took a lot longer because there was a lot in there that I didn't know anything about at all,
Hmm.
and even right down to the name of the Korean company, Sanseo. I I've forgotten where I got this from, but I was aware that there was another Korean company that was named, and a Japanese one that were named after flowers.
Hmm.
They were just not flowers that were familiar to us. And even
Yeah.
though we knew the company name, we didn't know where it came from. So I thought, well, this is going to have to be something like that. So I was trying to find a flower that commonly grew in South Korea, and it had to sound good at the same time. And it had to have kind of other connotations that some the characters could have banter about. So he is talking to the lawyer at the beginning about it being a cure for impotency and stuff like that, and also the fact it's used to. And again, that the yellow theme is in the book throughout. So that took a long time, and trying to find out what the most cutting edge technology was that a company like that would have. And I think it's that. I mean, I would never have known about this. I think that moment where he gets in the lift at Sansu and he thinks something's gone wrong, and he's actually at the 45th floor with apparently no motion at some incredible speed, and those lifts actually do exist, and he's the woman he's with notices he's surprised. So I spent a good sort of day and a half reading about lifts and what's it called, the sensi is the Chinese dogwood, reading about that flower when it comes out, why a company like that would have chosen it. So there was a lot of stuff by which time I'd forgotten what the story was about. and what I was doing and who I was really and who my parents were.
Doesn't that describe the writing process?
Yeah.
The that is one of the things that I found impressive about your book so far is that you do a good job of one of the things, like, not that everything has to go back to Fleming, but that's the most stark example of this I think of. He usually took a commodity and then built the mystery around said commodity. I think
Yes,
you've
that's
done a
right.
great job in your series of taking industries almost, and
Yeah.
or at least two or three different types of industries and putting them all in a story together. And the story branches off in some ways from them. Example being like the fashion industry or the tech industry.
Yeah, yeah. I think that if I mean I can see. I mean, Ian Fleming, in a sense, had it easy because he, Bond being in MI6, was going to a lot of foreign countries at a time where people didn't go on foreign holidays. You know, no one in this country would have been to Japan in the 1950s unless in some sort of military fashion. And all so he, he could think, well, oh, we've got Russia or Istanbul or all these other places he travels to. These books are always based in London, so he has
Hmm.
to take you to a world, a cultural world, if you like, that no one has come across before. And the fashion industry was one of those. People know it exists, but they, as I didn't know before I started researching it, I didn't understand how the progress of careers happened in it and what sort of college
Hmm.
courses you'd have to go to to do these sort of things. And again, burlesque was another thing that I wasn't sort of really sort of savvy with. And also, because when I'm dead, the world of modern prostitution,
Hmm.
it's where he was saying that they tend to use the latest technology. So in the 60s, call girls appeared, but he sort of says, sort of half jokingly, what, and as you do it online, what would these be called? E-girls, because it's all
Hmm.
done online. And the site presumably takes money, a percentage. So the site is kind of like the pimp.
Hmm.
So you're on there. The girls pay presumably to be on these sites, and there must be someone who's raking off the money for it somewhere. Otherwise, it
Yeah.
wouldn't exist. So the fact that it always takes modern technology. I mean, I was going through it, and there's a description of sort of that when he's sort of finding it exhausting, and he's saying all those faces, all those fake names, all this and that. And I spent probably about a day looking at these sites to see how they, so making notes to see how they worked. And when I finished, I just realized what a big thing it was, and it was this massive, great industry out there that was now
Hmm.
had now co-opted the internet to
Yeah.
exist, and that the idea of telephone calls, which people maybe still have in their head about how all that works, were completely redundant, and they would no longer need it. I suppose that it makes it in some ways safer for the girls, probably not a great deal safer. But there
Hmm.
was also that thing of the fact that when girls are sent out on out calls, they book two rooms. So in case the client is sort of mad, violent, high on drugs, they've got a safe room they can go to in the same hotel. And just
Hmm.
things like that had never occurred to me. I didn't know people did that. So
Well, I just can't imagine what your internet algorithm looks like right now. I'm sure it's very fascinating.
yeah, it's yeah. So there's loads of stuff. I mean, most of it I don't know about. There's very few things in there that I haven't spent ages reading, but I sort of feel obliged to do it, because
Hmm.
otherwise it just becomes like other stuff. And particularly, I mean, the descriptions of women and the way they speak is it's quite important. And I've forgotten who it was now. Someone said, "Oh, you've got to read this guy. His stuff's been made into a film." And I just thought, because it's exactly the same. The women are sort of hi, honey, and all this shit.
Yeah.
And another one is I've forgotten which book it was. I read it about a year ago. It was a John le Carre book, and the female
Hmm.
characters are as if they're written by someone who's never met a woman in his entire life. I'm sure that's not
Yeah.
true, or is it?
Hmm.
But it's yeah. I thought it's still cliched in crime that
Yeah.
mystery
All of your
knows.
characters feel real. And when we did an interview with Matt Bird, he wrote a book called The Secrets of Character. And one of his main points was what makes characters feel more real is when they have specific tastes.
Yes.
And I think that's something you do a fantastic job in, not with the women in the books, with Daniel Beckett specifically, because they all do have these specific tastes. It does ground them more in reality, especially with someone like Beckett, for whom his like actual history is far more shaded. and we don't know
Yeah.
about it, giving him hyper-specific tastes helps make him more real as a character for the audience.
Yeah, I think so. It's I'm getting darker. If you notice, can you see that
Yes.
there?
It's like you're in the witness protection program.
It's oh look,
There we
okay,
go.
I just moved. Is that some motion set? Yeah, it's actually I don't really exist. This is actually the real past you're seeing there, apart from the fact that the film posters make that not make sense. But it's interesting actually. Just looking at this now, Italian film posters are really big
Hmm.
primary color stuff, but the films, that's Riso Amaro there and Dolce Vita, you can see, are actually always in black and white. So it's really disappointing when you see that. But actually, this is what the poster should be like, isn't it? They're saying, look,
Yeah.
this is not, you're being conned here. This is not this is not a color film. It's a black and white film. Look.
When you're writing, do you have a specific writing routine that you follow? Like every day you write this many hours, or is it far more free
No,
flowing? What's your
I'm not.
process look like?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're meant to do. I've never had any sort of training in it at all, and I just do it. And there's a point where I just sort of feel I can't do it anymore, so I stop. But then if I have an hour off or so, I just come back to it. Um, you have to sort of keep at it, really. Otherwise, you just with these books, you forget what's going on. There's just loads of things in there. Where I'm thinking, how can he possibly know about that? That doesn't happen for another three chapters, something like that. So I try to plug away until it's finished, and there's a point where I can almost like see the end of it, which is quite sort of satisfying. You think, like, God,
Hmm.
at the early stages, I think I've only done sort of like 90 pages. I could finish this now, and that's not enough. So I don't have a plan really. I try and do some bits sort of kind of, as you probably know, write themselves, where you
Hmm.
suddenly just zoom through an entire, and that's often characters that are fun to write, where the
Hmm.
dialogue, like with Caroline Chow and Femme Fatale, the dialogue between her and Beckett and what she is like was just coming out really fast, where after he has the meeting with that guy and she's walking down the street with him, she's going, "So you think I'm a good looking girl?" And I thought, when you know what she's like, the fact at that moment just came to me where they're in Chinatown and they go to the sort of sunnier side of the street, and Beckett just notices after a couple of minutes that when people see her, local Chinese workers or whatever they happen to be, they cross over the other side of the road, and he keeps another eye on it. And another couple of people, as soon as they watch her, so a woman touches another one on the shoulder and they cross over, and he's completely baffled by this. And in some sort of way that we don't understand, they see her for what she is, basically. And it's only when he has that lunch with Doug Tang that he's sort of, yeah, okay. And but yeah, so scenes like that with her, you just couldn't wait to get back to a chapter that she was in again. And the same with Lever in Bitter Almonds and Jasmine. I was thinking, when can I get back to the scene that she's in? Because she's sort of like some potty, basically, and all this rushing around doing all the shopping and stuff and making these. After him and Francie have been through this absolute hell, they go back to his flat and she's got all these snacks and champagne and stuff, having no idea what they've just been through. It's yeah. I mean, so it is. It is. I wish I had a routine. I know people who've done stuff for TV, and it seems when they talk about it, it's as if they sort of get up, have
Hmm.
breakfast, sit down, and they go right like that, and just write. The first like 60 pages or whatever it is. Whereas I'm going, Christ, what's this going to be? I don't know what I'm doing. There's always this sort of, you probably read this with other people, there's always this sort of idea that you'll actually be found out. And finally, they realize, people will realize that, this guy has absolutely no idea what he's doing. And in a way, as I don't have any idea what I'm doing with thrillers, that's possibly what makes them different from other ones, because I don't read that sort of stuff. I mean, I run these. My girlfriend is probably the first to read them. She actually reads that sort of thing. She reads sort
Oh,
of Joe Nesbo, and do you know him?
yeah.
Or is it her? I don't even know. It's Jo, so it could be a female. Um, and she read before I did. I read them subsequently. All those Stieg Larsson books,
Hmm.
and so she watches that sort of like cozy mysteries and stuff on TV. So she's got that interconnecting how plots make sense thing, which I don't. I never know what's going to happen, and I often have to go back and tie things up so something later on makes sense. It'd be nice to have that sort of kind of cool, collected, this is what you do when you're writing a book thing, but I just don't have it. So I just depend on someone else who possibly knows what's going on to say, well, that couldn't happen because he hasn't met her yet and stuff, which I would never have spotted myself. I had having read it about 6 times already. So yeah, and often it's that whole process, where you go to the proofreader and they say, "Are you sure you want
Hmm.
to say that?" And other people who read it along the way saying, "Well, you sure about this? Because this looks as if this is happening." I said, "Yeah, I know it is. It is happening." It's I mean, I don't intentionally, somebody put, I think there's a review of Acid Yellow and Amazon where it said, somebody said, and envelope pushing, phew, just wait till you get to, in block capitals, that chapter. I think you know which one we're talking about. And, it never occurred to me. I was a friend of mine who the one introduced me to publish in the first place. I've been drinking with him a couple of months ago now, and I mentioned this. And I said, "Has this ever been done in a detective story or a thriller before?" And he's like, "I don't think so." So I just thought, well, maybe it has. It's just, but some of them are kind of that's in case you're wondering what that noise is, a dog trying to get into the room here. It's some of them I read on holiday, right? Robert Ludlum, that the Bourne
Hmm.
are based on. I just couldn't get into them. I don't know if you've read them
Yeah.
yourself.
They exceed the Terrence Lehue reading length of number of pages. I look at the size of those books and I'm like, no.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just some of the description. I think I read the Born Identity, and I've seen the film, obviously, and I thought, oh, maybe the
Hmm.
book will be okay. And it's just horrible, sort of like rape descriptions and stuff in there.
Oh,
I put it in the shelf for other holidaymakers who will come to the hotel. They have something to read. I sort of got note in it. Good luck. But a lot of these things, I just wonder if it's just me, where people are hyped up and you think, oh, so and so's a great writer, oh, he's great at this, and you read it, you think, what are they talking about?
why are
This is
they saying he's a great writer? I feel that way
it's a
about Tom
great comparison.
Clancy, and maybe it's just because I've never given him enough of a chance, but it's also he writes far more technical, and that was like the breakthrough thing for him. That's why
Yeah,
people liked him. I prefer really snappy, good dialogue, which admittedly is part of the reason I
yeah,
enjoy your books.
yeah. I mean, I suppose I've done various sort of different sorts of TV stuff, and I've done some comedy in the past, and when you're doing that, you have this thing in your head where somebody says something, and the person who's going to reply to them, you're thinking, what is the funniest possible thing that person could say back to them now? So you can't have dead bits of dialogue that just don't do anything. You're thinking, how can this be the most amazing comeback to what that person has just said? I mean, it's just like I'm sure there's lots of examples, but I think when he was walking down the street with Caroline Chow and she suggests going out for dinner, and directs into this Chinese restaurant called the Jade Gate. And he says, "Nice name." Jade Gate is Chinese slang for female genitals. So I thought, what could he possibly say to that? Because obviously he would know what it was, and he just says, "Nice name." So that was the only conceivable thing he could say there. But these books are full of that sort of thing. But yeah, it's yeah. So yeah, I guess I'm quite good at dialogue because of having done it so much, and I think that's why they're in first person, because I can't imagine
Hmm.
there's things just blah 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 said so and so excitedly and stuff.
Okay, so I had a question about that. You've written all in present tense, and
Yeah,
most mysteries are usually in past tense.
yeah,
Was
yeah.
this a conscious choice from when you started writing, or did it just
I just
naturally come out that way?
it just came out like that. It seemed like you have to, if it's not in present tense, there's a lot of there's just more work to do. Keep thinking, oh well, then I mean, John le Carre does this where I'm sure this is called Future Imperfect or something, where he says after this had happened and this case had been wrapped up, so and so would say that at this time this should have happened. Or I think, how could you, I don't think I can get my head around to doing that. And John le Carre pulls that all the time, where
Hmm.
later they would say that at this moment, and I don't care what they would say later. It's like a little device to pull you out of the story because he's run out of ideas or something. I'm sure people who love him are thinking, who does this guy think he is? Who does he think he is? Has his stuff been made in TV series and films? No. But yeah, so it just seemed obvious. And from doing TV stuff, there is no writing in past tense.
Hmm.
I think
True.
it'd be true.
Yeah.
So that's just the way I was used to doing it. I wanted it to be a kind of sort of straight narrative, so you're straight in there basically.
Hmm.
And so what was it? Someone picked up on Dead as New, Kiss Me When I'm Dead, where it starts off with I think the moment I saw, I knew we were going to sleep together, and then it goes into his description of the
Hmm.
receptionist or the PA or whatever she was, and so it changes tense there straight away.
Yeah.
It's like he's looking back on this at that
Hmm.
point, and then bang, you're in the present tense. And I thought, well, that's clever because we're never going to go back to that future retrospect view of what's going on. But that's the only time I did it, I think, and that wasn't intentional. I did. It's only when some sort of noticed it, they said, "Oh, that was good," because you start off, and now we're in the story in the present time. But it's not the present time; it's in the past because he was just looking back a minute ago. I said, "Oh, really?" I mean, all these things you do in school in English, future imperfect and past imperfect, and didn't know what they were then, and I don't know what they are now, but I might have been using them by accident. It's hard to know, isn't it, really? I've read more stuff actually since I've been doing this, but not much. I sort of like I said to you earlier on, I take people say, "Oh, you should read this," and I don't know. Maybe it's just I just don't read those sort of books. The only thing I used to read when I was in school was like horror stories and stuff like
Mm.
that, which have seeped in a bit, possibly. You
What
kiss me when I'm
is what's your typical like go-to pickup to read right now?
I really got. I tell you, the last couple of things I read are the scripts of the three Christopher Nolan Batman films,
Oh,
which
hmm.
are interesting. There's a big load of stuff where they're discussing it at the beginning. Um, I've seen those films, obviously, but it's not often you get to see that type of film. The paperback is like this. It's a really thick
Yeah.
book. And another random thing was a book by Emile Zola called the Belly of Paris, which I bought because what's his name? Anthony Bourdain, the chef,
Hmm.
said it was one of his favorite books, and I just thought I'd
Oh.
never heard it. And
Hmm.
so I've got that, and it's a bit sort of it could be the translation from French. You can never tell. Some books you just find um, difficult. And
Hmm.
I think it's often the translation because I've read other books that have been translated in another language. I mean, the Stieg Larsson ones, despite the fact they're full of exposition and technical detail, are much easier to read
Hmm.
than this one. There's a few sort of, I suppose, the occasionally I'll pick up what could probably be a thriller. There's a book called About the Author by John Colapinto. There's a
Mm.
guy about this guy who's writing this book and he wants to be a great author and he can't manage it and he's sharing a flat with this nerdy kind of law student and he lives this terrible life and every night he comes back and tells all his tales to this nerdy student. I'm ruining this book for whoever's watched it. And when this guy's out, he can hear him typing and he thinks he's doing his law work. He's actually writing up this guy's stories as a novel. Then he gets killed. So this guy takes his book and pretends it's his because the way he sees it, it really is his book because it's all his stories. And there's like copies of it have gone to some girl that the guy knew. So it's just this hellish race to try and cover his tracks. And of course, then he gets a big agent, and this sort of stuff, and then he's got to do the next book. But the next book, of course, is the one you're reading. This is his next book. It's I thought that was quite clever. But
Sounds very Hitchcockian.
yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, I just tend to be. I tell you, another one I read is you've probably seen that film, The American, with George Clooney.
No, I
Uh,
haven't.
he's the guy that. he makes sort of guns for people. It's a sort of
Mm.
quite a few. It could be about 10 years ago now. I think people generally watch it for what's her name, Violante Placido, the Italian actress who's in it.
Mm.
The book of that is first person, written by a guy called Martin Booth, and that's a really good book. And it was just like this guy who's had this below the radar life making precision weapons for sort of hit. I've got dark again for sort of hitmen and stuff like that. Obviously, the film is sort of takes liberties from the book. The film is almost
Hmm.
like a European film, even though it's got George Clooney in it and some other well-known faces. But that was quite good, and it's the sort. I haven't read it again, but it's the sort of one you keep because you know you will read it again. So,
Hmm.
but I've never had a particular genre really. I struggled with those Girl with the Dragon Tattoo books, though. I
Hmm.
found that so much information and so much sort of crime information and stuff like that that it became. I think I actually might be disappearing gradually. I'm sort of like it's like
You're just fading into the background.
no, oh there I am. Oh yeah, I
There
can
you
see
are.
that with the dentist. My face is still a bit swollen out from having dentist hands. Um, but they need the money, the dentists. So I'd often
Hmm.
go and have unnecessary work, despite, despite how painful it might be for me. They always seem very happy. And one of the ones I've been to has a TV on the ceiling showing David Attenborough documentaries with jellyfish and stuff
Oh.
like that for nervous patients.
Hmm.
But inferior to that was another one I went to, which had the news. So you was sitting there watching the damn news with the sound off. Uh,
That sounds just as torturous as going to the dentist.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I've often wondered, if I in some way actually paid for that television. but yeah, so yeah, my reading is I've become quite interested in photography books. Actually, it's like
Hmm.
reading words and stuff is too hard for me now. And I came across a few like Mark Lagrange, that guy I was just showing you, and Helmut Newton I now quite like, and Peter Lindbergh. A lot of them are fashion photographers who went a
Hmm.
bit in one way or another. But
I was
yeah, I saw.
curious what your interest in photography was because there is a degree in acid yellow where we go on a
Yeah,
bit of an extended photography
yeah,
sequence.
yeah. That was I watched a couple of films about Helmut Newton and another about Peter Lindbergh. I also was in touch with a German photographer called Jochen, if that's how it's pronounced. Something I can see his book from here actually. Jochen Arndt, and he actually sent me his book
Oh,
Masato,
cool.
which you can see there in glorious black and white.
Hmm.
It's the same model throughout the book,
Oh,
and
that's cool.
he just met her on occasion and just put it all in one book eventually. And I had to ask his advice on cameras for that scene you're referring to because I really didn't know what photographers used. I assumed they all used modern digital cameras, but they don't. A lot
Hmm.
of them use film because they prefer the way it looks and stuff like that. So a lot of that, the setup in the chapter you're referring or chapters you're referring to, was done by reading a lot of stuff about it. Really, I had no idea what sort of light things, those big umbrella things, they actually used
Hmm.
were, or what they were called. And I suppose really the way photographers behave around models, you have an idea of it because you've seen it in films and stuff like that. I watched Blow Up, which has got a lot of that in it, and apparently that's where Austin Powers got inspiration from. That, oh baby, yeah, that sort of stuff. So yeah, yeah, and he does mention in the book. He says, "Tell me if I sound too much like Austin Powers." But I've never actually seen professional photographer work. Though in for Femme Fatale, I did actually go to see a burlesque show, but it
Hmm.
was more like sort of family entertainment. Really, it wasn't the sort of thing that I was describing in the book. And where that
Hmm.
came from was at the Crazy Horse burlesque center or whatever it's called in Paris.
Hmm.
And I had a Blu-ray of that, so I was watching one of these performers lip syncing to this song, and that's what happens in the book, where she's lip syncing to this completely imaginary song, which I actually wrote uh, into French using Google Translate, and had her mime to it and referred to as if it was a real song in the real world. No one's noticed.
Dominic, this has been a really fun conversation. Where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
Uh, Basically, I think you should just go into Amazon. You type in Dominic Piper into the search column thing at the top, and it will say, "On no account, look at this author's work." Because when he's being spoken to, he gets darker and darker, which means that the supernatural might be involved somehow.
This is going to be like, I'll tagline this the most noir conversation on Suit Up.
It is, isn't it? It's dark. It's dark noir. So when I move closer, it kind of gets better, doesn't it? I don't know. I mean, on the plus side, you're probably wondering what color those cushions are. I'm not going to tell you. That's just, or what the throw over the sofa is. You're not going to find out about that or what those books are.
As big a mystery as Daniel Beckett's past.
Yes, it's a mystery that can't be solved. Okay, that's very nice talking to you.
It's been a pleasure. We'll link everything in the show notes.
Okay, that'd be great.